Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our webinar is beginning. My name is Steve Love, President and CEO of the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council. We want to thank you for taking time to join us today for this webinar that's hosted in coordination with Unity Medical Alliance, an associate member of the Hospital Council. Today, we're going to be discussing bacterial or non-bacterial infection. You're going to know after 10 minutes. Unity Medical Alliance is a healthcare management and solutions organization that provides medical, pharmaceutical, and business services to the government and to commercial healthcare sectors within the healthcare divisions. We've got three excellent speakers today. They include Terence Green from Unity Medical Alliance, Ken Blakeman, who is the Chief Operating Officer of RCS Healthcare. And we also have Tommy Hall, Director of U.S. Sales at Lumos Diagnostic. What a great panel. We can't wait to hear this presentation. One final note, you have questions during this presentation, please type them into the Q&A or the chat box, either one, and we'll try to review those and get you answers at the end of the presentation. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Terence Green.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. First, I want to sincerely thank the DFW Hospital Council and Stephen Love for allowing us to be part of today's important conversation. We appreciate the Council's leadership and their commitment to bringing innovative solutions and valuable education to healthcare organizations across the DFW region. I am Terence Green. I am the President and CEO of Unity Medical Alliance, or UMA. It is a pleasure to be with you here today. For those who may not know, as Mr. Love just mentioned, Stephen just mentioned, UMA, we are a healthcare solution and strategic growth organization focused on connecting healthcare organizations, providers, and innovative companies with solutions that can improve patient care, efficiency, and outcomes. Today is a great example of what can happen through strategic partnerships. UMA is proud of our strategic alliance with our partners, RCS Healthcare, represented today by Chief Operating Officer Ken Blakeman, and Lumos Diagnostics, represented today by, Director of U.S. Sales, represented today by Tommy Hall. Together, we're working to bring innovation to diagnostic solutions to healthcare providers to address some of the world challenges in patient care. And the one that we're going to focus on today is respiratory infections and antibiotic stewardship. Acute respiratory infections are among the most common reasons patients seek medical care. Yet, determining whether or not that patient has a bacterial infection or a non-bacterial infection can be very challenging. Most respiratory infections are viral and they don't require antibiotics, but antibiotics continue to be prescribed in most cases, in many cases. This creates an important opportunity to improve clinical decision-making, patient safety, and antibiotic stewardship. So today we're going to explore some tools, how they work, the data, the science, and most importantly, patient safety. Our goal is to provide practical insights into how innovative diagnostics can support healthcare professionals in making faster and more informed decisions at the point of care. Thank you again to the DFW Hospital Council, to our strategic partners, RCS Healthcare, Lumos Diagnostics, and most importantly, to everyone who is joining us today for this conversation. With that, we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce or bring in Mr. Kenny Blakeman. Kenny, please introduce yourself and your company, sir.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here today. As well, I do want to also thank the DFW Hospital Council, Mr. Love, for allowing us to participate in this informational webinar, especially right now with respiratory season almost upon us. So everyone's kind of looking towards, information related to this type of testing or what's available. My name is Kenny Blakeman. I'm the COO of RCS Healthcare. We are a distribution company that tries to focus in with manufacturers with unique and niche products, products that actually, make a difference in the medical field. And today's discussion is a prime example of one of those where it makes a true impact on patient care for providers. RCS has been a distributor and worked with Lumos Diagnostics now for the past 2 to 3 years. And because of that relationship, we are a tier 1 distributor with Lumos and with Phase Scientific for the FebriDx product, which we mentioned today in Tommy's presentation. And because of this, we have the ability to get some of the lowest acquisition cost of the product and be able to work with our customers using that acquisition cost. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Tommy Hall, who I've worked with a lot here recently on multiple levels. So Tommy, I'll let you take it away from the educational piece of this webinar. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny and Terence and Stephen, and thank you to everybody that's attending here today. It's a great time to be having this conversation. As Kenny mentioned, we're right around the corner from respiratory season. And, when we look at respiratory season and we look at it matches up with one of the biggest challenges we face in healthcare now, and that's antimicrobial resistance or the overprescribing of antibiotics. And you don't even have to be in the healthcare industry to know this. You see it on the news, you read about it on social media and magazines. Everywhere you look, you see that the great next epidemic that's here already and that we're fighting is the rise of antibiotic resistance and antimicrobial resistance. And so this is a perfect time today to be talking about antibiotic stewardship as we get into the respiratory season. And we're excited to be here with you guys. So as Kenny mentioned, I am the Director of U.S. Sales for Lumos Diagnostics. We are based out of Carlsbad, California, and that is where we manufacture and produce the test FebriDx that we will discuss a little bit later today. But before we get into that, we first have to talk about, the issue and the problem. And when we look at antibiotic stewardship and the overprescribing of antibiotics, we have to trace it almost back to, acute respiratory infections. And that's because acute respiratory infections are the leading reason, A, for people coming in to seek medical attention, and B, for antibiotic prescriptions. So as we all know, ARIs are those things that bring us into the doctor or medical facilities we're not feeling well. The common cold, the sore throat, cough, congestion, runny nose. These are the main reasons, again, that people are seeking medical attention. And unfortunately, for antibiotic prescribing, the majority of ARIs are actually caused by viruses and do not require antibiotics. Yet antibiotics are still prescribed in up to 50% of the time. And that's, there's several things that factor into that we'll look into. But obviously one of the main reasons is it's really tough still to differentiate between a bacterial infection and a non-bacterial infection. Those symptoms overlap. A lot of times, patient presents with what you would think could be flu or COVID. They could have very similar symptoms and overlapping symptoms of what actually is some type of bacterial infection, whether it be strep or something else. And antibiotic resistance, continues to be a huge global threat, contributing to about 2.8 million antibiotic-resistant illnesses a year and 35,000 deaths a year just right here in the U.S. So when we look at antibiotic prescribing, when we look at antibiotic resistance, we start right here with acute respiratory infections. Not only is it a big problem right here at home, it's a huge global threat. The WHO did a study in 2023 and found and stated that if something's not done to drastically tackle AMR, that by 2050, one person could die every 3 seconds. That would make AMR actually the leading cause of death, overtaking cancer in the world. And when I first read this study, I thought, man, it sounds kind of drastic. One person dying every 3 seconds. I don't know if I'm buying into that. But the more I dug into it, the WHO did a study in 2016 and found that a little over 700,000 people had died in 2016 due to AMR. And then they did the exact same study again in 2022, and that number had already jumped to 1.2 million. So just in 6 years, the number of deaths worldwide due to AMR had almost doubled. And so whether we reach this number of one person dying every 3 seconds in 2050, I don't know. But what I do know and what we do see is that it is a major problem right now, and one that is only continuing to grow and be one that needs to be addressed. Obviously, huge problem right here at home too. Big emphasis on it. You'll see the stats there in the purple box in the middle. You really can't walk into a healthcare facility anymore these days and not hear about antimicrobial stewardship committees, antibiotic stewardship plans. There's metrics that facilities are graded on. There's a huge focus throughout all the facilities on really just getting to the proper prescribing of antibiotics, really trying to curb this trend that we're seeing of the increase, not just in illnesses, but in deaths when it comes to AMR. And so it's a global problem. It's a U.S. problem. It's one that we've recognized. It's one that the government has recognized. It's one that health systems recognize, all the way down to urgent cares and primary cares. Everyone now knows, hey, this is a great issue. This is a big issue, one of the main ones that we need to address. And that's why we hear so much about it and are seeing so much about being good stewards of antibiotics. And so when we look at the problem, there's several factors that come into play. And obviously the first one I already mentioned, but it's still very difficult to differentiate a bacterial infection from a non-bacterial infection due to those overlapping clinical symptoms, whether it be a sore throat and a fever, body aches, earaches, congestion, whatever it may be. Those respiratory symptoms can tend to overlap and typically do overlap when we're looking at a bacterial from a non-bacterial. There's a high volume of AR patients daily, especially in your respiratory season. Again, this is the main reason that people seek medical attention. And so those urgent cares, those ERs, those primary cares, pediatric offices, you name it, they're flooded with patients. They have little time to assess those patients. So their waiting rooms are full, they're packed, the time to assess those patients is short. And so that all just kind of continues to compound on the difficulty of differentiating. There's still a limitation in rapid tests that can accurately diagnose acute respiratory infections. We've made great strides in the diagnostics industry over the last several years, but there's still great limitations out there on getting our medical professionals those answers that they need in a rapid manner. So not getting them those answers 1 to 2 hours later, where they're having to then call the patient after they've left. But getting them those answers right away, where they can treat those patients, they can accurately understand what's going on. And then let's face it, we've all probably been guilty at some point in our life, but the patient expectation to receive an antibiotic is at an all-time high. They come in, they're just demanding that Z-Pack, or they're taking their child into the pediatrician and they're demanding that antibiotic so they can get them back to school, get them out of the house. The patient demand for an antibiotic is through the roof. And, they don't understand that, hey, taking an antibiotic when you don't need one is actually going to do you more harm than good. And so a lot of it drills down to that patient expectation just coming in before knowing what they're even dealing with and demanding that antibiotic. So all these contribute to the problem of antibiotic resistance and the overprescribing of antibiotics. And I think we all can agree we see this daily in our medical settings. And so that brings us to Febridex. So Febridex is a rapid point of care test for acute respiratory infections. It gives you the reliable differentiation of bacterial from non-bacterial infections. If you remember anything about Febridex today, remember this: it has a 99% negative predictive value in ruling out bacterial infections. So when Febridex comes back negative, telling that healthcare professional that that patient does not have a bacterial infection, they can feel extremely confident that a antibiotic is not needed, and that patient is dealing with something of a non-bacterial nature. Very easy to use procedure, all-in-one instrument-free test device. So everything you need to run the test is right there in this disposable cartridge that you see to the right. There's no need for any type of instrument. There's no need for a separate blood draw. Everything you need to run and read the test is right there in that cartridge. And just recently, as of the end of March, FebriDx is now CLIA waived. So FebriDx is available for use in all CLIA waived settings to give our healthcare professionals and facilities some accurate differentiation now of bacterial from non-bacterial infections. When we look at FebriDx, it's comprised of two biomarkers. One is CRP, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. It's an acute phase protein that is a marker of inflammation. CRP is a great protein and a great marker. The only problem with this is it's non-specific. And so CRP can be elevated in our bodies in the instance of a viral infection, as well as elevated in the instance of a bacterial infection. The other protein that FebriDx measures is MXA. So MXA is a host immune response protein, and it is specific for viral infections only, and it is only elevated in our bodies in the instance of a virus or a viral infection. So MXA is very specific, again, only elevated in the instance of a viral infection, and is a host immune response that kind of goes to warn the other cells when a virus is present that, hey, something's not going right here. And so what we found is when you combine CRP and MXA, it allows for early and accurate differentiation of a bacterial infection from a non-bacterial infection. Very simple to use. Once you've gone through it once, it takes about 20 seconds to administer the test. The first thing you'll do, you'll see at the very end of the cartridge there is a little gray nub with a green protective covering on it. You'll remove that green protective covering. Then you will press that. What that is on the end is a spring-loaded lancet. You'll press that into the finger of the patient. That will then lance the finger, and then that lancet retracts back into the device, making it no longer a Sharps hazard. Once you've done that, you'll massage that finger to work up a drop of blood. Then you'll see there at the end of the cartridge is a little horseshoe apparatus with a collection tube attached. You'll touch that collection tube to that drop of blood, and it'll almost just siphon that blood right up into the tube. All that's needed is 5 microliters. So really one good sized drop of blood is all you need for your sample there. Once that tube is full, you rotate that horseshoe apparatus arm over, and that will then dispense the blood right there on the cartridge into a little collection well. Once that blood has delivered into the collection well, you'll press the button at the end of the test, and that activates the test. What's underneath that button is a blister pack of buffer solution. So when you press that button, it's going to pop that buffer solution, release it to collect with the blood sample and take it across the test strip. Then at that point, once you press that button, you start your timer. And after 10 minutes, once that blood sample has gone across the test strip and collected in the blood collection window at the bottom, you know you're good to go and read that test result. So again, everything you need to run the test is right there in that cartridge. The only thing you might add is a Band-Aid or a piece of gauze. And then everything you need to read it is right there on that test cartridge right after 10 minutes after pressing that button. Very simple to interpret too, especially in a post-COVID world where we're all used to reading these type of tests at home. The first thing you'll look for that'll come up almost immediately after you release the buffer solution is a blue control line. If that blue control line does not appear, then that test would be considered invalid, and you would need to run another test. If you get a black line only, that is telling you the patient has a bacterial infection. If you get a red line only, a red line with a black line, or no lines at all, that is telling you it's a non-bacterial infection and an antibiotic is not needed. And so let's dig into these lines a little bit more just to give you a little more education on them. So a black line, the black line is measuring our CRP, and the red line there is measuring the MXA. And so while you might have 3 different visual reads of a non-bacterial, they're still all telling you a non-bacterial infection. but the red line is measuring the MXA, and the black line there is measuring the CRP. Outstanding clinical performance with FebriDx. Our FDA trials were multi-center prospective clinical trials at 20 point-of-care sites. FebriDx was blinded to the physicians, to the medical professionals, and then compared to a composite clinical reference algorithm, which included bacterial culture, multiplex PCR, BioFire, and other measures of host immune response. As you can see on the right there, FebriDx showed a very high sensitivity and specificity in differentiating bacterial from non-bacterial infections in ARIs. And then again, that main number, FebriDx had a 99% negative predictive value in ruling out bacterial infections. So we look at the market segments for FebriDx and where FebriDx is found valuable. It's again for acute respiratory infections. So anywhere people go when they're sick. So obviously in today's time, urgent care, private practice, for people with children and pediatric, they're still taking them to their pediatrician. Freestanding ERs, great fit in freestanding ERs. We've seen a lot of value and a lot of adoption in freestanding ERs. And then taking that to, of course, hospitals and ERs within hospitals, especially in respiratory season, where those ERs are just flooded with patients. The ability to use it as a triage tool and quickly identify what those non-bacterial infections are and what the bacterial infections are, so really what patient population needs to be honed in on and figure out what's going on and prescribe an antibiotic, and what others that are just dealing with a non-bacterial infection, so you can get them back out the door. And then obviously, anybody that would be administering the test, from an MP to a PA to a physician, any of your medical professionals within these facilities that would be administering a test are users of FebriDx. So obviously, number one with any type of diagnostic or medical device is the improvement of patient care and the patient care value. And obviously, FebriDx brings that. But when you can add a second piece of a great economic story, a great economic value, that just helps even more and is so much more important. And FebriDx has a PLA code. So PLA code is a proprietary lab code. So it's a CPT code, but it's proprietary to FebriDx only. And so nobody else can use our PLA code. It is assigned just to FebriDx. And we received a reimbursement rate of $41.38 on that. So FebriDx has a PLA code of 0442U with a reimbursement of $41.38. And when you see a in sales price out there to the market of $25 to $28, that's just a great economic story of what FebriDx can provide from an economic standpoint. It was published in the 2025 Clinical Lab Fee Schedule. All 7 MACs from a Medicare standpoint have FebriDx on their fee schedule. And then we also have a value add that we provide to accounts with a third party that has a dedicated team for FebriDx called Prospectus. And Prospectus is kind of the gold standard out there in the industry with helping with medical claims, billing, reimbursement, any questions that might arise if there's any denials. And so we provide that to customers as kind of a value add. If there's any questions on the front end on how do we properly file claims for FebriDx, how do we deal with any denials, any reimbursement issues you have, Prospectus is there to do as much of the heavy lifting or as little of the heavy lifting as you need. However basic the question may be or intense and assistance that you need from them, they're there to help from a billing and reimbursement standpoint. But a great economic story on FebriDx as well. And so just to wrap up, the benefits of FebriDx: reliable differentiation of bacterial from non-bacterial infections, increase the confidence in patient diagnosis and whether or not to prescribe antibiotics, whether or not they're needed. At the same time, ensure bacterial infections are not overlooked. While we focus on and talk about ruling out and the importance of ruling out a bacterial infection and the need for antibiotics, ensuring that those bacterial infections are not overlooked is just as important. And making sure that those patients aren't sent away only to return 3 to 4 days later in much worse shape And it makes me think of a story. I was out rounding with some clinics here recently, and one doctor told me, he said, just last week I had a patient come in, respiratory symptoms, but had some other things going on too that just wasn't matching up. Flu was negative, COVID was negative. And so he said, I administered a Febridex and it came back bacterial positive. So it came back positive for bacterial infection. And he said, so just based on my clinical acumen and everything else I was seeing with this patient, I decided to go ahead and have them admitted to the ER. So the patient was admitted, culture was taken, and it ended up being that the patient had E. coli. And so the doctor looked at me and said, I'm not saying that your test saved this patient's life. He said, but it really helped in my diagnosis of what needed to go on and getting this patient the proper care. And so there's just the importance of being able to capture those bacterial infections are just as important. Obviously, the ability to initiate that appropriate treatment right there during the patient visit. I like to call this test and treat. Again, you're not having to wait to send something off to the lab. You're not having to wait a couple hours or even send the patient away and then call them with results. You're able to know right there what they're dealing with, what you're working with, and be able to have a pathway for them for the best possible treatment. Again, confidently rule out a bacterial infection with that 99% negative predictive value. And then what a better tool to support these antimicrobial stewardship plans that are in place to help reduce unnecessary antibiotic use within our medical facilities. Just a great tool that can really help give those doctors just another piece of information, another added piece of information to really help them assess those patients, understand what's going on as we look at the world of antibiotics, look at the world of acute respiratory infections, and really know whether an antibiotic is needed or an antibiotic is not needed. Just a couple other things to mention. The current age range of Febridex is 12 to 64. That's not because Febridex doesn't work well in kids under the age of 12, and it's not because it doesn't work well in adults over the age of 64. In our original FDA trials, we ran into the COVID pandemic, and while we had enough data to go ahead and submit to the FDA and obviously gain FDA approval, the FDA came back and said, hey, your sample size below the age of 12 and your sample size above the age of 64 is a little smaller than what we'd like. And so that's why they set the age range 12 to 64. Febridex is used in many other countries, all the way down to 1 year of age. And there's multiple studies out there showing how well it performs in pediatrics. And then the data in our original FDA study shows it performs just as well over the age of 64 and under the age of 12. But that's why the current age range is 12 to 64. And I say current age range because we are right now in the middle of our pediatric trials. So the FDA said, hey, go back, get a larger sample size for us in this pediatric age range. And so that's what we're doing right now. So we're right in the middle of our pediatric trials. And here soon we will have that age range lowered down to 2 years of age. And then we will look at the older age population in the future. So 12 to 64 is the current age range. And then I mentioned CLIA waiver. So we were launched originally as a moderately complex test, but here at the end of March, we did gain our CLIA waiver. So we were excited about that because obviously Febridex is a point of care test that is best used when you can use it right there in the midst of the patient, rapidly get that result and know what's going on so that you can treat that patient and move them out the door quickly. And then finally, I will just say, from a distribution standpoint, we are so glad to be partnered with Kenny and RCS Healthcare to help get Febridex out there to the masses and to help really curb the antibiotic resistance and do what we can to help improve antibiotic stewardship and the reduction of unnecessary antibiotic use. So excited to be partnered with them today and Terence, and thank you for letting me take a little bit of your time to talk about AMR and antibiotic stewardship and Febridex. And so at this time, I think, Stephen, we can turn it over for any questions that people might have and discussion.
Thank you. Great presentation. I want all the people that are participating to know you will get a copy of this presentation. And of course, Chris always records the webinar. You know, you really covered one of the questions that was in the box, and it was, what are the ages? And I know you said 12 to 64 currently, and you've got pediatric trials underway. Do you have any idea, or do you have a rough estimate of when the trials will be completed and when you hope to get FDA approval, to go down to age 2?
Yeah, so if my VP of Medical Affairs is watching or listening, she always hates it when I ask this because I'm always pushing her to get it done sooner. But I would say by this time next year is a shot, but it could be before, it could be a little bit after. We have to get so many bacterial positives in kids, and that can be a little tough. And so it's going very well right now. But I would say, possibly by this time next year, but could be later than that for sure, just depending on how quickly we can get those appropriate number of bacterial positives we need.
Great. And reminder to people, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A box or the chat box. A question I have, can you run this test in conjunction with other POC or PCR tests?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as you know, FebriDx doesn't tell you, what type of virus or bacterial infection it is. It's just giving you a yes, there's a bacterial infection, or no, there's a non-bacterial infection. So yes, we see facilities that will use this as the first line of defense. So for example, patients will come in, they will be presenting with a respiratory symptom. That nurse checking them in or that tech checking them in will then go ahead and administer a FebriDx while they're doing, the blood pressure, the temperature check. What are you in for today? They'll go ahead and administer a FebriDx, and then that way that before the medical provider even comes in the room, they know what they're dealing with. That, hey, I have a bacterial infection going on in room 2, or I have a non-bacterial infection in room 5. And so they know what they're dealing with before they walk in that room, and then they can go on to more testing if they would like to. So if it comes back non-bacterial and they would like to know if it's COVID or flu, they might do a COVID-flu combo test, or they might just do a flu test. If it comes back bacterial, they might run a strep test. It also is a great complement to the big panel tests like a Spotfire or any of those big panel tests. It just gives more clarity of what you're going to want to look for in your panels. Knowing that, hey, I'm looking for a bacterial infection of some sort, or I'm looking for a non-bacterial infection of some sort. And while the data is not out there yet, it's coming. We have heard from large facilities, large systems that have this in multi-sites that have seen very early on, not only a reduction in antibiotic prescribing, but when you're talking about using it with other tests and how it can complement those, they've seen a reduction in the time it takes to get a patient in and out the door. And so, yes, it can be used in conjunction with other tests because, again, it's not telling you the specific problem you're dealing with. It's just telling you whether you have a bacterial infection or not, and just giving you more clarity then to choose to use other tests if you'd like, or to be able to eliminate other tests if needs be.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Based on the hospitals that you've worked with and the physicians you've worked with, how and where does this fit best in most hospitals?
Yeah, great question. Anywhere they're seeing acute respiratory infections, which these days is everywhere. So when you talk about hospitals, we hear a lot about the value they see in the ER, again, as a triage tool, especially in those influenza season when those ERs are just packed, and the ability to know that, hey, these patients have a bacterial infection. We need to understand what's going on here. Do they need to be admitted? Are we dealing with something that just needs more testing and it's strep or something else, and we can get them an antibiotic and get them treated? And then, hey, this section is non-bacterial. Let's either flu test them for COVID if we want to, or let's get them back out the door, home, rest, fluids. Don't be back out in public until you're 48 hours fever-free, whatever their protocol may be. It just gives them the ability to quickly triage those patients so they can better understand what's going on with everybody in that waiting room, but then know that, hey, this is where I need to put my attention on these bacterial infections. And then furthermore, with it throughout hospital systems, now there's so many hospital systems that have urgent cares underneath them. Obviously, that's the number one place people go with acute respiratory infections is the urgent care these days. So those urgent cares that hospital and health systems might own, freestanding ERs are growing like wildfire. So they're taking the urgent care model, but they're adding the services that an ER attached to a hospital would have. So you get more and more patients going to those freestanding ERs. And then, of course, all their primary care doctors and their primary care practices throughout hospital and health systems. Those are just a few of the main call points or the main points you would see FebriDx providing a lot of value. I'm sure we'll discover more. You know, again, just having CLIA waivers since basically April, it's pretty new to market, but that's where we've already seen tremendous value. I'm sure we'll continue to find other areas within hospitals and health and hospital systems where FebriDx provides value. But again, really anywhere you're seeing acute respiratory infections and patients coming in with those symptoms of upper or lower respiratory.
You know, Tommy, you may not know this because I know it's early, and you know it's been on the market for not a long period of time. But have you heard any of the providers, whether they be physicians or hospitals, have they had any problems having this reimbursed by insurance companies?
Yeah, great question. So that's why we decided to join and bring on Prospectus and have a dedicated FebriDx sales team because we knew it's not something specific to FebriDx when you look at reimbursement as far as anything new to market. So there's always a time and a period where it takes for those payers to recognize it, to understand what it is. What is this FebriDx test now that I'm seeing it coming across on this claim? So that's nothing specific to FebriDx, but any new medical device, any new medical diagnostic, medical product new to the market is going to go through those growing pains with reimbursement as they deal with those payers. And so that's why we brought on Prospectus to help really shorten that cycle and curve that and provide that service to our customers if needed, where they can help them with that reimbursement. So I will say we've seen a ton of traction already. As you can see, we quickly got on all 7 MACs with Medicare. We continue to add Medicaid states almost weekly. And the private payers, we're seeing a great reimbursement. Again, it depends on the contract. As far as how much you're going to get back from that private payer, it's going to differ by each facility because it's based on their contract with that payer. But we're seeing very positive reimbursement across the board. Are there some denials out there? Absolutely. We have the measures put in place with Prospectus to help with those appeals, to work with those payers to understand, hey, this is why they're using FebriDx. Here's the medical necessity of FebriDx, and really help those payers get on board to then recognize it and add it to their schedule. So long-winded answer to your question, but the reimbursement's going very well. Still will see some of those denials, but we're here to help and get those ironed out as quickly as we can.
Great. I mean, that makes sense. Looks like a great approach you're using. You know, especially for the providers and the physicians, where can they acquire this test?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, Kenny's right here. RCS Healthcare has been one of our top distributors from the start. He's a tier 1 distributor that has the lowest pricing, lowest transfer pricing out there. And so RCS Healthcare with Kenny and his team can provide FebriDx to anybody that would like to use it and like to look into it.
You know, when you look at FebriDx, what is the shelf life and storage requirements that you would have to utilize?
Great question. I meant to touch on this earlier. So the shelf life of FebriDx is always going to be at least 18 months. So very great shelf life. And storage requirements are room temperature. And so it's very easy to keep FebriDx within any type of facility. And again, you've got a long shelf life there on it. I don't think you're ever going to need 18 months to go through a box, but it does come with that 18-month dating. Each box contains 25 tests, and those are all individually wrapped. And so that's another thing that providers and healthcare professionals love is the ability to take 1 or 2 and have them in their lab coats or have them in their pocket. They're individually wrapped in tinfoil packs, and so they can be taken out of the box and individually transported. So yes, 18 months, and then storage requirements are just room temperature.
Oh, terrific, terrific. Um, I don't have any other questions myself, and I'm checking the Q&A box and checking the chat box. I don't see any additional questions, but if people do have questions, please type them in because this is a great topic and a good discussion. While we're waiting to see, uh, does anyone have any thoughts they would like to share with the group to see if we have any questions forthcoming? Well, I don't see any additional questions, so I really have enjoyed this presentation. This has been very educational, and it sounds like you're making a good inroad with this new product. Uh, let's see. Here's a question that just popped in. How's Febridex used on a year-round basis?
Yeah, so obviously respiratory season, you're going to see a huge usage of Febridex, but you continue to see it even through the summer months. Obviously, it dies off some, just as pretty much any type of respiratory testing would. But still in the summer now with COVID kind of lingering all year round. Obviously, it spikes, at certain periods of the year, but it still kind of lingers now. Strep, other things that might pop up from kids being at camp and in those close quarters together. So you do see the usage throughout the year, but obviously, there's a much bigger need for it from about that, October time period through March for sure.
Right. Really appreciate it. And, Terence, Ken, and Tommy, do y'all have any closing remarks before we end our webinar?
I'll just close and on my end and just again thank everybody for coming on, and just again say the thing that I love about Febridex is it's such a simple tool to use, but yet provides such a huge piece of information that we've never had in this manner to help fight one of the biggest fights that we're now all taking on in the healthcare industry. So to have a disposable cartridge that can tell you bacterial or non after 10 minutes with just one drop of blood that's CLIA waived is just such a groundbreaking product and such a simple to use and simple product and test, but yet it meets such a huge unmet need out there in helping to fight not only antibiotic resistance and the proper screening antibiotics, but the differentiation of bacterial from non-bacterial infections. And so just so excited to be a part of it. We've just seen overwhelming results already as we've launched out there into the market, and really just excited to help improve patient care and really help to drive the proper prescribing of antibiotics.
Well, I will close by telling you that some of the folks said great education for all of us, terrific presentation, and a fabulous tool. So you're getting very positive feedback from some of our participants. Well, with that, Terence, do you and Ken have any closing remarks?
I do, but Ken, if you have something, you please.
Other than, yeah, Tommy had mentioned, it is a simple device. It is, it's actually easier than some of the COVID 3-in-1s that we see because there's no reagents, no swabs. So that makes a beautiful little device, and it's simpler than those devices. And as well as with the whole antibiotic resistance and as well as antibiotic stewardship, the U.S. Senate's actually looking at some things, passing an act right now, trying to get their hands around antibiotic stewardship, just because they see, the potential of a superbug, down the road, and we won't be able to address it because people, a lot of people could be antibiotic resistant. So it's gotten to the Senate right now, and they're trying to get an act on the books and voted on.
Great.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, I mean, this technology just blew me away when I was first introduced to it by Kenny and RC. as healthcare. I came from the world of pharmaceutical and was in the fight for COVID and for the flu. I actually launched Zofluza for flu, which was the first oral antiviral out there for in medicine in the first 20 years or so to treat the flu. And then I also launched Paxlovid during the COVID years as well. I'm so sorry. There you go. So I was really excited when I saw this technology because I know physicians were having challenges just trying to differentiate the two. And I know the discussions that have been taking place with patients. So when I was introduced to this, and I just lost my mind because again, I saw the value that this can add to helping patient outcomes and fighting the antibiotic stewardship. So again, I'm just very happy to be part of this team, to be a strategic partner with them. And I want to again thank the Hospital Council and more importantly, thank everybody who was here for this particular presentation. I hope that they receive some valuable insight and more importantly, gave them some practical information to take back to their organizations. And again, here at Unity, we do believe the best solutions come through our strategic partnerships and partnering with, again, strong partners such as RCS Healthcare, as well as Lumos Diagnostics, again, and bringing innovative technologies and having that shared commitment to improving healthcare outcomes. I'm just really thankful for this opportunity. And again, feel free to reach out to either one of us with any type of questions, and we'll be happy to answer and give you further information.
Well, thank you. And Terence, Ken, and Tommy, this has been an excellent webinar. I want to thank all of you. I think it's been great information. I think it's been very beneficial for the people that participated. So on behalf of the Hospital Council, we thank you. We thank you for a great discussion. We're going to conclude our webinar at this time, but remember, Chris will be sending out the presentation and he will send out a recording of this webinar. So for now, we'll say goodbye, but we hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you.
You.
Thank you.